Welcome back to Weekly YouTube channel. I'm your host Owen, and today I'm back with Newt Westen from NFL Draft Westen on Twitter. We did a video podcast covering some draft stuff before the draft, and now we're back again to cover Newt's favorite team. I don't know if you could tell there or not from his background, but the Green Bay Packers. We're going to go through and talk about their draft class and really determine how they went through and how they did. But Newt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. I was just we're talking off camera. Starting to look ahead to summer scouting stuff. I know that for this draft class, especially, like, as much as it's fun to talk about it right now, it does not matter until, I don't even count like rookie mini camp. It really doesn't matter until late July, early August when we start seeing how these guys fit together. So it is kind of nice to just like step away from this. Like this week, doing some, overviews, talking about, where do they fit and everything. But then I know, like, especially on the app formerly known as Twitter, like, there's just been a big release. Like, okay, like, let's just kind of get away from it. So happy to kind of wrap this up, especially with the Packers, and kind of put a nice bow on this 2025 draft cycle.
Yeah, especially for me, I'm like, all the Bills people I follow were posting, and I'm supposed to do an episode similar to this with Randall, another draft professor, covering the Bills and how we view their picks sometime this week. And it's really just that's kind of the last remaining 2025 draft stuff that I want to touch on before I take a step back from that and either do some other fun content or just take a break from the grind as it was until we get into the next cycle of stuff. So this is kind of the more relaxed, fun. We don't have to stress too much about making sure we cover everything specifically. This is mostly just like a fan conversation, which is why I brought you on here to talk about the Packers with me. So let's start off with my favorite pick. I'm sure it's your favorite pick too, just from the player who it is. The first round pick of the Green Bay Packers, wide receiver Matthew Golden from Texas, formerly of Houston. I say that because if you followed us at all over at the Draft Professor, me and Newt went back and forth, and Matthew Golden was your wide receiver 6, correct me if I'm wrong?
If we're taking Travis Hunter out, yes, he was my wide receiver 6.
So he was his wide receiver 6. I think Matthew Golden ended up being my wide receiver 2 if we're taking Travis Hunter out of it. And then, but back at me, I had a Emeka Egbuka wide receiver 6 if you took Travis Hunter out of it, whereas he was higher up on Newt's board. So we did a friendly back and forth on Twitter, basically saying if the Bills drafted Egbuka and Golden was drafted to the Packers, we had to do like jersey swap, but only half of that came true. So have you gone back at all and rewatched Golden and tried to sell yourself a little bit more on him for the Packers?
I mean, I think it was about 15 to 20 minutes after the pick that I just like sold myself then and there. I wanted a wide receiver so bad, and I've been one that since this cycle began, and anytime I got a chance to talk Packers, I would always say that we need a dude in the system. For me, that dude was named, obviously, T-Mac, and he was gone. Emeka Egbuka, he was gone. And so, like, after that, like, Jaden Higgins, yes, Alec Eomanor, who, man, you could have grabbed apparently in the 4th round and not thought twice about it, which is still baffling to me. But, and then Matthew Golden. So, while I really liked Jaden Higgins a lot better, I know that the league was a ton higher on Matthew Golden. He was almost a consensus top 20 pick. And when I took a step back and I looked at it through that lens, I looked at what he's able to bring to the system. And once again, like, he's a top 50 player on my board. As it falls, he wouldn't have been there for me personally as the 2nd round pick. So if we like this playmaker and this game changer, then I was definitely able to get on board with it. He's obviously very different than what you're going to get with a Jaden Higgins. And I think in that sense, it just makes sense if the Packers wanted to go that route and put in like an explosive, dynamic playmaker rather than a big-bodied receiver. I completely understand that. So about like 20 minutes, I was like, I'm not crazy about Matthew Gold myself. And once again, top 50 player on my board, but I had a couple of guys higher. But in all reality, like, they did what I wanted. They grabbed a wide receiver. They went out and they got their guy. And who am I to be upset about that? So I walked away. I mean, even before the draft was done, happy with the 1st round pick.
Good, yeah. Obviously, we talked about it a little bit. I'm a little higher on Matthew Golden. I thought
Yeah.
he was probably the best separator. It was him. That style of receiver where they can be an outside guy. They're not the biggest, they're not the fastest guy, but they have quick cuts, can create separation with route running. He did show he had speed back when he played for Houston. That was kind of his one role, was as just a major deep threat for them. And he really turned it on once Isaiah Bond got knocked out of the lineup for Texas, especially into that playoff run. So I think he was someone that grew up draft boards, especially towards the end of that season there. I don't think so. With where he fits in with the Packers wide receiver room, I was looking at this. I think he's the perfect complement to what you currently have and what you ended up adding later on, which we'll get to in our next segment. But so like you have Jaden Reed, who's more of that run after the catch guy, more slot oriented player. Where that's my one criticism with Matthew Golden that I think didn't think he was typically consistent with and good at was after the catch, using that speed and being able to make plays. Basically, as a runner, more so than a receiver, I thought he did a lot of his damage up until the catch point. So I felt combining him with a guy like Jaden Reed. You also have a bigger body guy who can play more physical and be at the catch point with Romeo Doubs, and later third round pick Savion Williams now. And now you don't really have to rely on Christian Watson as being your only deep threat option, as well as your only other outside wide receiver. You have a guy who brings an element to that wide receiver room that you didn't really have on the outside, and you had Jaden Reed as more route running guy in the slot, but now you have your route runner on the outside, who brings some speed elements and has other players that can complement him. So I think he fits very well with what the skill sets you already had in that room and how that kind of is coming together as a more complete room now.
Yeah, and you also think this is the last year that Doubs and Watson are going to be on their rookie deal, so there's obviously something to play into it in that regard. But I think you hit it just right. The Packers are not going to have, as the big man is chugging his big water. The Packers are not going to have Christian Watson for, I've counted him out this entire season basically with his injury. I know that it's probably less than a year for his recovery time, but with that, I'm really not counting him for the major portion of the season. And I wonder, between Watson's injury history and just some tensions with Doubs in the building, I know that hasn't been like a picture perfect relationship. And there's been frustrations on both sides. I wonder if they're also making that step to be able to move on if necessary from one or both of those guys.
Yeah, I like the pick. Obviously, I like the player. I like how it fits, and I like how it works in with their projected wide receiver room. So that pick's been talked to death. I'm sure that it was covered immediately afterwards because Friday was still in the week cycle of the media. So we'll move on from that, and we're gonna go into the day 2 picks now. You guys have one round two pick and one round 3 pick. Really even distribution of your guys' draft capital. You're the third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and then 2 sevenths. You had one in each round. That's kind of rare, to be honest with you, especially coming as a
no, I was looking at that, and we didn't move at all from any of them. It was just come up, go, come up, go, come, and not that Goot's not a huge mover, but like at any point, it's surprising that none of those got traded or dealt for whatever reason. So yeah, absolutely. You go for it.
Yeah. So I was gonna say was looking at the day 2 picks you took. In the second round, Anthony Belton, the offensive tackle / just overall offensive lineman from NC State, and then another wide receiver in TCU wide receiver Savion Williams in the third round at pick 87. So of those 2 picks, we'll cover both of them, but which one of them do you think has a more immediate impact for the Packers in year 1?
I think it's going to be Savion Williams. Just with what the Packers want to do in giving Jordan Love more options and more weapons. I think that Savion Williams was picked because he is truly one of one. And me and you have talked to Savion Williams. I know you like Savion Williams for kind of the unique aspect that he brings to the game. He is, for all intensive purposes, has the opportunity to be a Cordell Patterson, a Deebo Samuel type player. Wherever his floor or ceiling may lie is obviously yet to be determined. But he's just such a unique player in what you can do with him. And I think that Matt LaFleur is going to see that right away, and he's going to be able to kind of, scheme and cook up things that are specific to Savion Williams. You've already seen how he's been able to put Jaden Reed in situations where he's able to be a jet sweep player and really take advantage of that speed and that ability that he has after the catch, or after, I guess, the ball's in his hand. Kind of one of the things that you mentioned is one of his strengths. So I think with Savion Williams, number one, he brings size to the receiver room. 6'5", the guy's enormous. He brings that element of a running back / wide receiver. We've already talked about his contested catch percentage. If you didn't hear, he has almost a 90% contested catch percentage, which is a ludicrous stat. The one thing that plagues him, and this is the one thing that just drives me nuts about the Packers wide receiver room, is the drops. He had about a 12.8% drop rate, which if you couple that, I want to say the Packers on average, all of their receivers, including their tight ends, probably put it at about 10%, which is just terrible. It's one of those things where, especially if you have Jordan Love, who is trying to push the ball around the field, it can be frustrating at times when you have those players that have such a natural ability to get open and do things that are schemed up really well behind Matt LaFleur and his prowess as an offensive coordinator and obviously as a play caller. But when that ball gets dropped, it's obviously not as bad as a turnover. But man, that's like the next worst thing when you have a ball that could be a 30-yard reception and it just gets dropped. It takes a lot of air out of the tires. So the one thing that kind of held me back about him is going to be that. And I know that if you look at the Packers wide receiver room in a whole, it's something that I wish we would have got a sure-handed guy instead. But Savion is one of one. So I think in that regard, going back to the original question, that's what's going to get him a little bit more on the field quicker.
Yeah. For me, I wasn't the biggest Savion guy because I was grading him out as a wide receiver specifically. I didn't have a way to quantify having him be just like a pure athlete, which is what they did. Well, for those who don't know, Savion at TCU was used as a wildcat quarterback, as a running back, as a tight end, wide receiver. They just got the ball to him however they could. And what I think that and his other strengths, like you said, were going to be contested catch situations, is using his 6'5" size and going up and attacking above the rim. Those were his two biggest things. And as you touched on it, drops, route running in general, he was very limited as a route runner. Didn't ask him to do much as a traditional wide receiver at TCU. He's going to be one of those guys that you're going to have to come in and give him touches and not ask him to do too much too quickly as a traditional wide receiver. But I mean, with how the Packers right now are structured, they have Matthew Golden, who's going to be more traditional X with the route running. They have their slot guy, Jaden Reed, like we were talking about earlier. And I think Savion is what their projected replacement for a guy like Dobbs or Watson is, who's going to be the player that they can trust to push the ball down the field and win in 50-50 ball situations. That was their potential viewpoint of that. And that, like you said, how Dobbs, there's been kind of a contentious relationship there. Watson just hasn't been able to stay healthy. He was already an older rookie. So it's hard to really see how either of those guys are Packers for much longer of a term, at least especially if they want to get paid. So I think that was the long-term investment to complement a wide receiver room of Golden and Reed in the slot. Well, as well as with the tight ends you have there. So I'm not the biggest Savion guy. I think my biggest knock on him was that the fact that he just wasn't really used as a returner. You'd think for a team at TCU that wanted to get the ball in his hands everywhere they could and let him just use his ball carrier vision and speed at 6'5" to make guys miss, they would use him a lot more in kick returns and punt returns. But he never took a single punt return in college. And outside of a handful when he was on hands teams and stuff this year, and then his freshman year, he took 33 kick returns. But other than that, he never was a primary kick returner for them. So maybe the Packers can unlock that for them. That's the way you can impact the team now in the short term while also being a gimmick guy. But yeah, go ahead.
I've got to imagine that they want to do that somehow. Keyshawn Nixon's already voiced that he really does not want to be the primary kick returner anymore. He wants to focus more on that cornerback role, which is obviously becoming a little bit more prevalent for him, given the fact that the Packers didn't grab a cornerback until round 6. So I think that's going to be something where if you see Keyshawn wanting to step away from that, Savion Williams, because of all the things you mentioned, does have an opportunity to step in there. The other thing is also going to be with punt returns as well. You have a guy like Jaden Reed, who the Packers love to have in just any way that they can get him on the field as possible. Really similar to, like, he just reminds me of Randall Cobb when we had him back in the day. He was a punt returner. He was our slot wide receiver. But as he became more and more valuable, you want to take him out of that situation where he is a punt returner and maybe a little bit more susceptible to, accidental injury or something like that. You can get a guy like Savion Williams who gives you all that juice. He gives you the size. He had damn near 30% missed tackle forced percentage last year. Like, that's what you want. So I would love to see him in that role, in that situation. I completely echo everything that you just said with that.
Yeah, I think especially with the fact that even though he's going to be the eventual replacement for Dobbs and Watson, they're both still on this team at the moment in time. So
Yep.
Golden's going to be the guy they drafted that's going to be the start day one at wide receiver player, and Savion's going to get some like manufactured touches here or there. I think, especially because the kickoffs are different from college to the NFL. Now the NFL it's more like a run play. I think Savion is going to do a lot better as a kickoff returner in the NFL than he ever did as a college player. So I think that might be where he makes his impact year one, and then slowly moves into a wide receiver role as those other guys clear out, and he has a more clear path to wide receiver. So that is our takes on Savion Williams. I'm let me put it this way: I'm glad the Bills didn't draft him because I didn't really see a future or a potential for him to play for us. But for the Packers, I like the fit a lot, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the player himself. So that was a good pick. Yeah.
And then so flipping the coin over to Belton, this is one where it's a long-term investment with Belton, in my opinion. And I'm not talking like 3, 4, 5 years down the road. It's probably like, next year they're taking a look at, well, Rasheed Walker is coming up on the end of his deal. He played left tackle. What do we do? Did he play amazing? No. Has he been serviceable? Yeah, he's probably been, I don't know, a top 20 tackle in the league. And, at that rate, obviously the Chiefs have shown that, like, if you don't have a guy like that, then you're going to run into some issues. And he's definitely been adequate there. But I wonder if with Anthony Belton, you have Jordan, like, Packers already had 6 offensive linemen for 5 spots. They had Rasheed Walker, they had Jordan Morgan, Elton Jenkins, Sean Ryan, and Zach Tom, along with Aaron Banks, who they just got in free agency. So there's 6 guys for 5 positions. So then you go ahead and you spend a top 60 pick on another guy who's going to fit in that room. It's definitely an investment for the future, in my opinion. I think that they're taking a look at their room and what they're able to do with that. They want to have 6 guys that they can feel good about. But next year, once Rasheed Walker comes due for a contract, I think they're preparing themselves to say, you know what, we're probably not going to extend one to you for the money that you want. Congratulations, and we hope you the best. Now, I don't know if that's for sure, but I have to think if you have like those 7 players now on the roster, that's got to be in the cards somewhere. And so with that, I think it's an investment for the future. I know Brian Maffey thinks that Belton's definitely more suited to play guard and have a have a Jordan Morgan kick out to left tackle. I think with Anthony Belton, it gives you, Mowgli, how we doing? It gives you a ton of versatility in how you want to structure that group. Like when you got Zach Tom to play on the right side, you have a lot of versatility with him. He just ended up being a great addition as a tackle. So, I truth be told, like I see the vision for the Anthony Belton pick. I don't love it because there was still some pretty good cornerbacks on the board. There was still some pretty decent edge rushers on the board. And I really wish the Packers had addressed one of those positions early on with their draft capital. They went 2 wide receiver and 1 tackle. To me, I would have I love the wide receiver pick, but I probably would have then flipped the other 2 to be somehow hitting the defense and helping that out. But I know the goal is, you have a franchise quarterback, help them out in the best way possible. And that's what they did with their top 100 picks.
Yeah, I had Sam Teets on when I was doing the live stream reactions on day 2, and we were live when they made the Anthony Belton selection. So we were talking about this, and Sam Teets brought up the point of that Jordan Morgan would probably be the preferred starter left tackle once Walker's gone, and that Belton would most likely move inside the guard, maybe replacing Sean Ryan down the road eventually, especially because they just signed Aaron Banks. Yep. So when it came to that, once we finally got through that discussion, it kind of confused me a little bit that they went Belton there in the second round because they have Jenkins, they have Banks, they have Tom, and then you already have Morgan at left tackle, eventually in down the road replacement for uh, Walker when he eventually leaves. So we're just looking for a guy who's going to be your down the road right guard replacement. I thought that was a bit rich to go a second round pick with, even though I love Belton, especially even like I think he can play tackle. Like as a right tackle in the NFL, I think he's athletic enough. He has some good nasty to him to be able to throw dudes around and really impact that, which is also why I think he can guard because he has that power in his game. I do think him being a future right guard for them is good. I just was confused by the fact they went that route with the second round pick when they had holes at corner and you had a guy who met their physical thresholds like an AZ Thomas already on the board still there who went in the third round to the Jets that you could have taken there. And then even if you went Savion in the third and then went and tried to grab an interior offensive lineman or signed an UDFA like Luke Kandra to be a eventual right guard replacement. There's always
we'll talk about that later. I've got a pretty fired up take on one of the day 3 picks.
Yeah. So I didn't think it was the best use of investment. I love the player. It's kind of the opposite for me with the Savion pick, where I wasn't the biggest fan of the player, but the investment they made with their first pick and then complementing that with the third pick and the projection he has in that for that team specifically made me much more fond of that pick, despite my grade being lower than where he was selected. Didn't make me feel like it was like an abhorrent reach. Whereas Belton, I liked the player and liked the range he was drafted in. It's more so the use of that pick in for what the purpose of that pick and that player is going to be. That was more confusing for me.
I completely see aligned with that. I think he was like 56 on my board or something like that. So it's like, oh man, like we're right there. It's a premium position. I do know just like understanding how the Packers work and how they have worked forever. They want an offensive lineman that can play all 5 positions, or at least 4 out of the 5 positions that they would seek from them. So Anthony Belton, I can guarantee his first year, just like Jordan Morgan was last year, they're going to train him at all 4 or 5 spots. Probably not center, but like they're going to be kicking him around, having him play a lot of these different positions, so they can get used to, number one, have him get used to the playbook, get used to understanding, what his tendencies are, where he looks good, where he doesn't. I know that they like having those guys in the system that have a lot of versatility. So once again, I don't love it because there were other things in areas of need, but I do understand it. It's a really Packersy pick. One where they're looking ahead to the future and they're trying to get what they see as a premium position. I wish, obviously, just for the exact 2 positions that you said, that they had gone down that road. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they grabbed a good football player, in my opinion, and I can't be too upset with that.
Yeah, I think that's the good way to look at it. So let's jump into these day 3 picks. I'm curious for you. So with their 4th round pick, they took Baron Sorrell out of Texas, who was in the green room and stayed until day 3 to come out and address the hometown crowd there in Green Bay and get his moment on the stage. On this website I'm using that's talking about different picks that Green Bay made, they have him listed as a D tackle, even though they then go on to discuss him as an edge in the blurb they write about him afterwards. Did the Packers on draft day announce him as a D tackle or as an edge? Do you know?
God, I can't remember. I want to say they announced him as an edge.
That would make sense for how he played.
Correct. I mean, like he played, and he's got that kind of unique body where he could be like, in or out. I think Texas really squeezed as much juice out of him as they could at that. But like Packers playing a 4-3, I don't see him playing defensive tackle at the size that he is. It was 3-4, maybe, but I see him playing defensive end. He fits that really well, especially with the system that they have.
Yeah. So then we have in the 5th round, Oklahoma State. Again, they have him listed here as a linebacker, but he's more of an edge rusher too. And Colin Oliver, so double dipping on edge defenders there. And then 6th round, Georgia D tackle Warren Brinson, which we'll hear more about Georgia D tackles when we get to the UDFA section as well. And then 7th round picks, you had 2 of them. Tulane cornerback Micah Robinson, more of a developmental player there. And then in the 7th round, which I'm assuming is the one you're going to want to cover in a second, number
Yeah.
250, Cincinnati offensive tackle John Williams. So of these day 3 picks, is there any that stands out to you for being just any in general? I'll let you take that how you want to take it.
So like Baron Sorrell, that was probably the first pick that I was like, yes, I think like we actually hit that one really, really well. I think Baron Sorrell, his size and capabilities fit in with the Packers, and kind of what they're trying to do. I really like him. Plus, I thought it was a really cool moment. I feel like he had to kind of have the Packers in his ear for the reason being that he stuck around. Just like having that home crowd there and being able to do it. But it was a really, really cool experience. The press talk that he gave afterwards was absolutely phenomenal. So just like all around from a fan standpoint and, what he kind of did in that moment, I think it was really, really cool. But I also like the player. Like I thought that was decent value for him. And obviously, you take a look at where these guys are, you're going to pop up and down a little bit, but being an edge rusher from a high profile system, see here, I had him as pick 125 on my board, and he went 124. So, like, kind of like an Anthony Belton, where it was like, man, this matches up really well. I thought that he was a player that, like, at this point, really need to fill that position because completely lacked it in the first 2 days. And it was a guy that's, his mentality and his size and everything he brings fits the Packers really, really well. So that one I was really fired up about. And kind of like the ones in between there, like, Colin Oliver, a little bit more of a versatile player. He can play linebacker. He can probably play edge, which is where he's going to most likely be used, I would guess, as a DPR type to start his career there. Warren Brinson, who honestly, I hadn't looked a ton at Warren Brinson. I looked at his teammate, which, as you alluded to, mentioned it just a little bit. So I'm kind of excited. I actually have to go back and look at him a little bit more. I mean, if you're going to say, hey, you get a Georgia defensive lineman, do you want him? Yes. Like that's going to be the answer every single time. You come from a system like that, you're going to obviously have good things to bring. Whether or not they are going to be something that eventually vouch you into the starting lineup, that is yet to be seen. But pairing him with another Georgia Bulldog and Quay Walker. I'm sorry, not Quay Walker. Why am I blanking here? Oh, I'm forgetting his name. And I'm a terrible fan at this point. Georgia defensive tackle that we grabbed in the exact same draft as Quay Walker.
Devontae Wyatt.
Thank you so much, Devontae Wyatt. Pairing another player like that is there. Once again, Michael Robinson, developmental cornerback. But then John Williams is one I get fired up about. And John Williams is about to catch like 5 strays. John Williams, I'm sorry. I really hope you're a great offensive lineman. But he played guard at Cincinnati. Do you know who was the better guard at Cincinnati? Luke fucking Kandra was the better guard at Cincinnati. Went undrafted. Packers at pick 250 had an opportunity to grab him and grabbed his teammate, who I think all accounts, and it's not just me. Like, obviously, I have Luke Kandra very high on my board, but by all accounts, almost every board out there had Luke Kandra above John Williams. And the Packers go with John Williams. Broke my heart to hear them take a Cincinnati lineman not named Luke Kandra.
Yeah, I was when I saw that, especially because it was another Cincinnati lineman, knew I had to bring that up to you. Is there any of these day 3 guys that you think specifically has, of the group of them, that could get starting rotations the quickest? You'd think it'd be Sorrell, just because he's the most like highly drafted of them. But at the same time, that D line has been added to so much in the past with the Packers that it might be harder for him to get a steady role. Whereas maybe a guy like Micah Robinson in the corner room, because it's just such an open competition there to try to figure out that position grouping, at least for now, unless they make a move, in the post-draft free agency market. Do you think that's going to be your pathway? Who do you think could make the biggest impact earliest on of those days?
Yeah, so I think Sorrell is that's like a cheat. If you ask me, I think that they have two edge rushers in their system that they're like really, really happy about, and that's obviously Rashawn Gary. You'd be crazy to discount him in any way, shape, or form. I know that they are really looking forward to Lucas Van Ness this year, and I'm guessing that's one of the reasons that they waited on the edge rusher, because they think that Lucas Van Ness is going to make that step. It took Rashawn Gary 3 years to do that. This would be Lucas Van Ness's third year. However it falls in there, maybe then that's the case. So after that, there's a severe drop off in talent, and I think that's where Baron Sorrell has an opportunity. But to your point, to be a rotation player, I think that you kind of like, if you take a look at the cornerback room with the Packers, Jair being there or not being there is going to play a really, really big difference. And I know I talked to a couple guys about this. If Jair's there, I don't think that, you're going to see a ton out of Michael Robinson early on. I think that Michael Robinson might be fighting for a roster spot early on, because you have Jair, Nate Hobbs, Keyshawn Nixon, who are going to probably dominate that early spot. And then after that, the competition starts, I think, for that next spot. But if Jair's gone, and then you're kind of like figuring things out from there, I think that really does change the dynamic of it. There's no one there. Carrington Valentine, another 7th round player who has had to step up early in his career. He hasn't blown, the roof off anywhere. I think he's been adequate, but I think there's still a lot that I'd like to see out of him. Maybe he takes that step forward, but I think that if you have a guy like Jair leave the room, it creates a massive void, which opens up some good competition. I'm actually going to say, kind of like just knowing the Packers lineup, I'm going to say the defensive tackle, I already forgot his name, Warren Brinson, or potentially the UDFA, though I'm not like super high on him as a prospect in general. I think the fact that he fell to as a UDFA was not surprising. But I think that defensive tackle group, Devontae Wyatt has not been what Packers fans hoped from a first-round pick. Kenny Clark is getting older. And then after that, it is a lot of day 3 picks. And I think that they're kind of still searching and hunting. I know I was really hoping that they'd grab a defensive tackle early on, but I think that room is thin as well. So I think either Warren Brinson or Micah Robinson have the opportunity to kind of step in early on, depending on how they pan out.
All right, yeah, and you mentioned the UDFAs, so we're going to wrap that up with our last segment of our conversation here. It's going to be on the UDFAs. I did a quick glance through. There's only one name I really recognized and was interested in talking about, and then there was another one I was interested in just because of the way some of the information I found out about it, which led me down the pathway of doing something I've never done before in scouting, but we'll get to that in a second. We're looking at the UDFA tracker. From the one I have in front of me right now, I'll read off who we have. We have running back Amar Johnson from South Dakota State, running back Jalen White from Georgia Southern, wide receiver Julian Fleming from Penn State, O-line Tyler Cooper from Minnesota, O-line J.J. Lippy from Northern Illinois, O-line Brant Banks from Rice, D-tackle Nazir Stackhouse from Georgia, linebacker Jamin Dumas Johnson from Kentucky, cornerback Tyrone Herring from Delaware, cornerback Kazir Bugs Brown from Florida Atlantic, safety Jonathan Baldwin, UNLV, and then we have some trial players also with quarterback Taylor Algersma from Wilfrid Laurier, wide receiver Jack Stutter from Wisconsin Lacrosse, linebacker Connor Lacrosse. Sorry, I'm sorry,
Wisconsin Lacrosse. Yeah,
Wisconsin.
No, Lacrosse. I get it. The way it's spelled out, I get it.
Linebacker Connor Shea from Wyoming, linebacker Luke Gunderson from Northern State, and punter Brendan Hall from Montana State. So for me. Now, I didn't get to this was something I'm actually curious to go back and watch now after we're done with this conversation. And Julian Fleming, because he was a highly recruited guy out of high school, and he's a 6'2", 208 wide receiver. He ran a 4.68 40, which isn't great, but he was a super high recruit by all the different media outlets coming out of high school. So I'm curious to see how he looked in college. Maybe he could be somebody that is an interesting watch after that. But the only real name that I saw in the true UDFAs that I found interesting to talk about is someone that we covered back in our Draft Professor days covering interior defensive line, and that's Nazir Stackhouse, the D tackle out of Georgia. Just your pure one-tech nose tackle guy, going to give you zero upside when it comes to a pass rushing output. But if you're looking for somebody who's going to be able to stay strong in the middle of your defense, run, defend, take on blocks, absorb contact, and make a handful of plays, not stuff the stat sheet or anything, but impact the running game in only ways that true, big boy nose tackles are going to do. I like Nasir Stackhouse specifically for that, and I thought he was a good day 3 flyer for a team like the Bills or the Packers or anybody who needed another addition to their interior defensive line to come in and just offer some beef up the middle for rotational bodies. So I think for me, Nazir Stackhouse is somebody I'm super interested in seeing if he can make this team.
Yeah, no, I thought with Stackhouse, I've got him around player 200 on my board. I'm pretty sure he just barely cracked my top 200, but he's a player that and we talked about it. Like I've never been excited about him. He had a lot of hype going into this season. And once again, he's a Georgia defensive tackle. Like he's going to get the hype just because of the logo on the helmet, which, credit to Georgia for doing that and creating that system. I think that there's obviously a lot of things that goes into that that helps those guys. But with him, I have him really, really close on my board to Jamin Dumas-Johnson, the linebacker. And I think that if I'm looking, I really, really wanted the Packers to snag what was it, like a true middle of the field linebacker. And I don't think Dumas-Johnson is exactly that. And obviously they got Isaiah Simmons as a free agent, and all, whatever is going to happen with him, maybe he finally unlocks it. But I think between what they have is their starting room with Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper, there's a compliment to both of those guys that I would have loved to see, like a true Mike come in. They didn't quite get that. I think that makes the Isaiah Simmons signing a little bit more interesting because you have another guy kind of like Edgerrin who you can play all over the place. But like Jason Dumas-Johnson, I like him in the sense that he has the ability to be a hard hitter and a really, really good run defender. And so I think like on early downs, he can give you a lot of juice in that sense. He's not a big guy. Like I don't even think he's exactly 6'1", but he's dense. I think he came in at 238 pounds. So just under 6'1", 238 kind of gives you an idea for his build. That's the kind of guy that I want, someone that's going to be able to come in and be an early down run defender at the second level. And I know Nazir Stackhouse kind of gives you that as well. But I think someone with that mentality of Dumas-Johnson, I actually like a little bit more. So for me, Jamin Dumas-Johnson is probably the one I'm most excited about having. And if I were to place a bet, I'd say that he's got the best opportunity to stick around to the final 53.
And now you said you were interested in Elgersma, the quarterback from Wilfrid Laurier. Was that the one you mentioned when I was going through the names?
Yeah.
There?
I mean, you got to love a guy that can throw the ball 70 yards downfield, especially if he did it Canadian football where, they can get the arena football run up. It was after, God, what was he in? Was he the Hula Bowl or was he in even like the Tropical Bowl? I can't remember. But like obviously seeing like the hype build around him pre-Senior Bowl and him getting the Senior Bowl invite was pretty cool. I think that obviously, he's kind of in that situation for a reason that there are pieces that his game is missing. But the Packers religiously have tried to bring quarterbacks in, draft and develop type mentality. If he's a guy that ends up making the 93 or the 96 man roster, whatever it is to start training camp, and they can keep him as a practice squad guy, I'd love to see that. I think with Malik Willis, still being on the roster, it is going to be something that precludes him. But, if you can really make Sean Clifford work for that third spot and then keep a guy that's got a howitzer for an arm on your practice squad, I think that's something that's really, really fun to have around. So Gers might just think from the name recognition and kind of like that little spark of hype that he was able to bring to himself in mid-January is a fun guy to have.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm double checking because I missed out when I working the UB Pro Day this year. I'm fairly certain he was there at the UB Pro Day because we had a couple of Canadian players, and if he's the one I'm thinking of that went to the Senior Bowl, right? He was there throwing the ball at our Pro Day for us. So he was pretty electric from what I've heard. People who I do know who were there, so that is exciting. And I know he was on the radar for the Bills to bring in for another tryout as well. So if he doesn't stick with the Packers, I think he's going to have somewhere to land, somewhere in the league. Yeah. And I don't know if there's anyone else you want to cover. There's one last player that I want to touch on just because of this.
I want to hear about the player that you want to touch on because I'm excited, like just kind of knowing the background on this a little bit. I'm excited for you to tell me more.
So Brendan Hall, the punter on Montana State, is a 6'9" punter. And I was amazed reading that. And I ended up just texting you when I first saw that, like out of just astonishment. Like, how the hell is there a 6'9" punter and now he's in the NFL? And for the first time in my entire history, I've never looked at specialists specifically in a scouting sense, but I went and watched his film from this past season at Montana State. And I don't know. So I don't know what the situation is with the Packers special teams specifically. Now, I know I looked at the stats, and your guys' punter was kind of middle of the pack when it came to net return averages and punts inside the 20. He was kind of just average across the board. I don't think you really necessarily look to move on from that guy. If anything, this is just camp competition, especially because it's just an invite. But do you know who was handling your kickoffs for this past season for the Green Bay Packers?
McManus was, I believe.
Okay. So for me, watching this giant man at punter, his biggest weapon was the fact that he's a massive person. You could tell on tape he's massive. And he's able to swing his leg really well into kickoff specifically. Like, he was a 90 overall PFF grade as a kickoff specialist at Montana State.
Wait, PFF has a grade for kickoff specialist.
Yeah,
you went way down the rabbit hole.
Oh yeah, I watched his tape and using PFF's or PFF Ultimate snap counts, you can break down their specific snaps and special teams. So on his overall special teams grade in 2024 was a 65.5. His kickoff team grade was a 93.7, and his punting grade was a 67.5. So that was where his grades, and then in the years previous, his last year at Montana State before that, he was a 92.8 kickoff grade and 84.4 punting grade. And he does have some experience doing kicking field goals, but his main thing seems to be as a punter and kickoff specialist. For me, I understand the kickoff specialist thing entirely because he's just such long-legged and a massive human being. He can really get a really big swing into that, especially when it's no one else is under pressure on him. He's able to run into it, plant, and really just get all of his weight into it on a free kick like that. He's able to boom that thing. So there's nobody getting returns. I was just
watching highlights of him.
Nobody's getting returns off of him.
No, not at all.
As a punter at Montana State, though, I'm a bit concerned because he's so tall, and he was one of the more traditional drop punters. Like, he'll do like the normal drop it forward, not the kind of rugby style that we see in college football sometimes. And he does a good job kicking at the lowest point, like how you would want it to be. Like, the mechanics are fine. It's just the fact that he is so tall and the fact that his legs are so long, he's going to need so much more room to be able to get these kicks off. And the time it takes for him to get his drop from when he drops the ball to when he's able to connect with his foot, the timing there is going to be a bit awkward and odd, especially for typical NFL punters. Like, even like ones that are like 6'2", 6'3", you see as like massive guys, especially as the punting position. So I don't know how well he's going to do. There was a lot of times where I felt like he looked a little cramped punting, and I was surprised he didn't have more blocks than he did, just because again, the mechanics of it functionally were fine, but it just looked like his gangly limbs and the fact that he has just so much size for a position where a lot of compact, tight movement and tight spaces under pressure is where you're operating with. That I felt that even though he's got this massive leg, and I'm sure he could tackle dudes if he really put his mind to it, being 6'9", 260. But as a traditional punter, I don't know how much of a sticking power he has in the NFL. So I think he's a fun story because he's a massive dude, and it got me to watch some actual punting and kickoff film. But I'm not sure he's going to bring anything outside of that. So that was just something fun I wanted to touch on because a 6'9" punter is ridiculous, and I had never heard of that.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you brought him up. That's fun. No, I think that kind of with that, both those guys are gonna definitely be at least fun storylines to follow.
Yeah, I mean, and especially with the, we're kind of getting into the dog days now where it's going to be rookie minicamp. What did we learn? Those would be the fun stories to actually keep an eye on, where everything else is going to be like, oh, these guys look good versus other, tryout level players, or these guys look bad and we should worry or something. Like all of that's going to be obviously going to be around the league a ton, but right now, just having some fun stories like that. I don't think the Bills did anything interesting with their UDFAs. It's a bunch of guys that I've either never heard of or are going to be probably not making the roster. Nothing super fun when it comes to like quarterbacks or 6'9" punters. So at least you got that going for you. But I overall thoughts on the draft class. I think they did well on the first 3 rounds, complementing what they have and kind of building for the future. Would there have been other ways I would have allocated those resources? Potentially, but I think I would trust the process with those 3 picks and how they used them. And I think I'd save most of my criticisms for where they went with the day 3 picks and who they went with those picks, especially knowing who was there. And how they went around and picked it, especially like not grabbing Lucandra and grabbing the other Cincinnati offensive lineman over him. Waiting until the 7th round or the 6th round to grab a corner, to also just like if you wanted to get more of like an above the rim player at wide receiver, you could have waited and grabbed an Eli Gallumander in the 4th round instead of Savion Williams in the 3rd. But hindsight for that is 2020, so you didn't really know how long he'd last. So
I think you hit the nail on the head because you start to look through things and you look at guys that were available for those. Was it Dorian Strong got drafted at like 176 overall? For me, like seeing him there, I had him, I think, as a fringe top 100 player. And if not, I think I'd be crazy. But like, yeah, I really really liked him, and just the fact that like, oh, he lasted that long. Packers, had an opportunity to address what is kind of a hole there. I could keep hopping down the line with like, oh, this player is here. Obviously, team boards are not media boards, and there's a reason for all of those things, whatever they may be. But I totally agree with you. Like I think that they could have gone in a different way, especially with how some of those picks shook out. I probably can reason it all the way up to Sorrell. Some of the other guys would have loved to have that edge and that cornerback hit a little bit earlier. But yeah, that's kind of where I see those guys.
Yeah, I think it's still a decent draft class, and like I said, I liked how they went with about doing their more valuable picks, so I can't really criticize it too much. Especially if Jair Alexander does end up being an issue, and you have to go with other corners. There's a whole market out there that of second wave, or I guess there's be like 3rd or 4th wave free agency at this point that you can be able to hit that up. Maybe there's a Rasul Douglas Green Bay Packers reunion in the works. There's some options there that I don't think they really were panicking to reach on some positions. So I can definitely see why they went certain ways with their day 3. So I can't kill them too much. So other than that, that's it for what I have planned to talk about here with the Green Bay Packers draft class. Coming from a Green Bay Packers fan, do you have anything else you want to touch on or have any more thoughts?
No, like I said, it's one of those things where the draft has come and gone. I truthfully probably will not even tune in that much to rookie minicamp just because it's more of like an acclimation and like acquaintance time for them. there's going to be a lot of those like fun storylines that come out. But you pour, God, what is at for some people 365 days. If you're sickle like Bill Sparks, it's probably like 400 days into a draft class. You definitely have a little bit of like of that, like, oh, I have an attachment here, but you're also ready to step away. So definitely happy to wrap it up with this and kind of get those thoughts out. Obviously looking forward to come end of July, early August, but not like, oh God, I can't wait. I'm like, we can take a little bit of time off here.
Yeah.
I think the NFL has got a good idea where they have their June and July as their off, as their like true, hey, step away and go on vacation season. So yeah, no, I loved it. Loved that you had me on here. I really appreciate it. Owen, as I've said, loved having the opportunity to work with you this entire draft cycle and make some awesome content together.
Yeah, it was awesome. And just as you were saying with the NFL and having their own vacation period, this is kind of our opportunity to now like take a step back and relax. I say that now, having come up to this, being like, oh, kind of over analyzing the draft and stuff, and not looking forward to diving into the next one just yet. Kind of a little burnt out. But then for some reason, every time we hop on something, we make content together. I always come out of like, oh, I'm ready to go record Randall now. I'm already to go dive into some other draft classes and maybe invite some other guys on. So I don't know what it is about the work we do that gets me kind of hyped up to go on and do some more stuff. So I
will say I am still starting like my summer scouting for like the next year, but it's definitely like, I'll get to those players when I get to them. Oh, I don't have to like hop on and make any content surrounding them. There's kind of that aspect where it's like, you get to what you can get to and you can go from there. It's not, some of the time crunch demanding things, but I do understand what you're saying. Like, yeah, I'd love to like, oh man, like talk about this. So I totally get it.
Yeah. Well, while you take a good break, Newt, and get to when you get to them, I'm probably going to be continuing to pump out content here. Like I said, I have a podcast coming up covering the Bills' entire draft class and UDFA class with Randall Slifer, covering the Bills for another fellow draft professor, which involved me going back through and watching all the players that I had not yet watched for the Bills class. I know I didn't do that for the Packers class here, but for the Bills one, I'm going to take the extra time to do that, extra care. And outside of that, I have a couple other different plans. I have a series I have in the works where I'm going to go through and watch some film and review guys of famous draft busts or famous draft steals and talk about where we missed that in their film in college and where we kind of missed with that as a media or consensus and the NFL teams in whole as well. As well as I have another idea where I'm going to probably joining a fantasy league with some other people where I'm going to try to win an entire fantasy league exclusively by drafting rookies from the 2025 NFL draft class. So we're going to see how that goes. I have some fun stuff planned with that. So without further ado, I think that's it for us today. Thank you guys for stopping in and listening. Check out Newt Westen over at Twitter at NFL Draft Westen. You can also check us out at the Draft Fanatics. You have a bunch of old live recordings of us. You want to hear us talk about any prospects that your team drafted, if they were covered in our D-tackle into your offensive line coverage or any other one-off episodes we did over there. So you can check that out at Draft Fanatic, no I am Fanatic on Twitter, or the Draft Professor on YouTube. And also, you can check out the rest of my stuff here on YouTube at Weekly Huddle. I'm going to be putting out, like I said, a lot more content over the summer, as well as a lot more stuff covering the draft, post-draft now, especially when it comes to the Bills and maybe some other teams. So without further ado, I think that's it for me and Newt. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you guys later.